A woman's jewels are not ornament. They are her only portable property, the one thing the law lets her carry out of a marriage, and every man who marries her knows it. When the shipping clerk courted the ironmaster's daughter, the town said he had done very well for himself. He had. He sold the garnets in Liverpool 11 weeks after the wedding, told her they had been stolen off the coach, and sailed for Valparaiso with the money and a woman from the Strand. She was left with a rented house, £41 of his debt, and no proof of anything at all. She did not weep, and she did not write letters. She wrote down the settings. 5 years later, a duke stood in a ballroom in Bath and looked at another woman's throat. Kestrel Row, in the town of Ardley, was 11 small houses in a terrace of soot-black brick, and the 8th of them was where Hester Marlowe lived on £90 a year that she earned with a needle and a set of jeweller's tools that had been her father's. She was 31. Her father had been an ironmaster who made his money out of ordinary things, hinges and grates and railings, and he had died when she was 24, leaving her the garnets that had been her mother's, and very little else, because the works went to a cousin. The garnets were not grand. They were a parure of 11 pieces in a foiled Portuguese setting, close-backed, with a collet on the largest stone that had been repaired once, badly, by a man in Chester with a lead-heavy solder that showed grey against the gold if you looked at it under a glass. She knew that because she had done the second repair herself, at 17, at her father's bench, cutting the old man's work out and relaying it. Nobody in England knew that detail existed, except the woman who had made it. Roland Sharp married her at 25 and was gone by 26. He took the parure out of the box on a Tuesday in April and told her on the Friday that the coach from Chester had been stopped on the turnpike, and she had believed him for 11 days, which was the longest 11 days of her life afterwards to think about. Then the shipping office wrote, asking for his address, and the landlord wrote, and a woman in Liverpool wrote to say that a Mr. Sharp owed her £4 for lodging and had sailed on the Aurelia. Hester paid the £41 off over 3 years at a shilling in the pound. She moved to the 8th house in Kestrel Row. She took in mending and then remounting and then repairs, because the trade in a small town will use a woman if she is cheap and does not put her name on the work. And on the first night in the small house, she sat down at the kitchen table with a stub of pencil and drew all 11 pieces from memory, front and back, with the measurements, and the floor, in the largest collet, marked with an arrow, and the date. She did not show it to a magistrate. A woman with no money who accuses her own husband of theft is a woman explaining herself to men for the rest of her life, and the law in any case held that a husband could not steal from his wife because there was nothing there to steal from. She put the paper in the lining of the box the garnets had come in, and she kept the box. Fen Aldeborough, 5th Duke of Ardwick, came to Bath in November because his aunt required it, and because it was easier than the argument. He was 38. He had inherited at 26, and spent the 8 years since discovering that a title is mostly a list of things other people expect. There was a stiffness in his left hand from a rope that had run out through it in the Baltic when he was 22, and a second son with a berth on a timber brig, and the 2 outer fingers did not close, and the county had decided those years were a disgrace, and he had let the county keep the opinion. He noticed the necklace at the assembly rooms on the 14th. He noticed it because he had been trained to notice metal by 4 years of cargo manifests, and because the woman wearing it, a Mrs. Vokes, the young wife of a very rich old man, kept touching it in the way people touch a thing they have not owned long. He was close enough at supper to see the collet on the largest stone. There was a grey seam in the gold, and above it a second seam, finer, laid cleanly, the work of somebody who had cut out another man's repair and done it properly. It was the kind of detail that only exists once. 2 nights later, he heard Mrs. Vokes tell a table of 11 people that the garnets had come from her husband, who had them of a dealer in Liverpool, who had them of a gentleman lately returned from the South American trade. Fen Alderberg put down his glass and went home and did not sleep well. He wrote to Liverpool. It took 5 weeks and cost him nothing but patience, and what came back was a dealer's day book with an entry for a Portuguese perure, 11 pieces, bought in of a Mr. R. Sharp in June of the year in question for £210, and a note of the address Sharp had given, which was the 8th house in Kestrel Row, Ardley. He went to Ardley in January. He went himself, on horseback, and arrived wet to the shoulders, and stood in a narrow front room that smelled of solder, lamp oil, and clean linen, while a woman in a grey stuff gown finished the seam she was on before she looked up. He told her what he had seen and where. He expected her to cry, or to seize his sleeve, or to ask what he intended to do about it. Hester Marlowe did none of those things. She wiped her hands, went to a shelf, took down a japanned box, slit the lining with a knife, and put a folded paper on the table in front of him. 11 pieces, she said. The measurements are in the margin. The arrow is the collet. There was a bad solder in it from a man in Chester, and I cut it out and relaid it at 17 at my father's bench, and there is no other stone in England set that way, because it was my own hand, and it was not a good year for my hands. She smoothed the paper flat. It is dated the night he left. I have had it 5 years. Nobody ever asked to see it. Fen looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he took the chair from beside the fire, set it under the lamp on the side away from the draught, and sat down on it himself, so that he was not standing over her. "Sit," he said. "This will take an hour, and you have been on your feet since 6. He offered to buy the parure back from Vokes. She said no. "If you buy it, Your Grace, then it was bought twice, and it was never mine. Buy it, and I have a necklace. I would rather have the record." So instead, she taught him, over the next 4 months, what a record is. It was slow, unglamorous, and mostly copying. She wrote to 11 pawnbrokers and dealers in Liverpool and Chester, with a description and a shilling for their trouble, and she wrote it in a clerk's hand, and signed it H. Marlowe, because a shilling from a man gets answered, and a shilling from a woman gets returned. 4 of them answered. She got the Liverpool day book entry certified before a magistrate. She got the shipping office at Liverpool to produce the Aurelia's passenger list, which cost £2 and 11 days, and there was R. Sharp on it with a woman entered as his wife, who was not his wife, sailing on the 22nd of June, 6 days after the sale. She got the Chester jeweller who had done the first bad solder in 1808, an old man of 80 by then, to write out and swear what he had made and for whom. And in the copying, she found the other thing, which nobody had been looking for. The Liverpool Dealer's Day book carried 11 other entries in the same 11 weeks, all from gentlemen lately returned, all bought in cheap and sold on at Bath and Cheltenham, and 3 of the descriptions matched advertisements in provincial papers for property taken out of marriages by husbands who had then gone abroad. It was not one man. It was a route. Fen came and sat in that front room in the evenings with a state correspondence on his knee, while she worked, and did not talk, and once she looked up and found him asleep in the chair. In March, she said, without stopping, "Your hand does not close." "No. A hawser, off Riga. I was 22, and running from a house I have since inherited." He flexed it. "It is nothing. It is not nothing. You have carried that box of papers up my step 11 times, and you carry it against your chest, because your left will not take a corner." She set the file down. "I am not going to be delicate about it." "I have not the time." He laughed, and it came out of him rough and startled, like something rusted being turned over. Mrs. Vokes's mother came in May. Lady Ancram was 68, and she came to Kestrel Row in a carriage that filled the whole street, with a solicitor, and she did not sit down. "So this is the person," she said. "I shall be direct. There is a woman of no family under this roof, who has been receiving a duke alone at all hours for 5 months, and who is now circulating papers in Liverpool touching my daughter's property. My daughter bought that necklace in good faith, and possession is 9 points of it. You will stop. There is a sum available for stopping, And there is also the observation that a woman in your position, living as you appear to live, has a great deal more to lose than a necklace. Fenn came out of the chair with something in his face. Hester put 2 fingers on his sleeve. "Sit down," she said. "This will not take long." She opened the file. "Lady Ancram, before we come to my position, your daughter did not buy that necklace. Mr. Vokes bought it, in October of the year before last, from a dealer in Liverpool called Petherick, for £440, and I have Petherick's entry certified. Petherick bought it in June, 5 years ago, for £210 from a Mr. R. Sharp, who sailed on the 22nd of that month with a woman who was not his wife, and I have the passenger list." She turned the papers so the room could read them. "Petherick's book carries 11 other pieces in the same 11 weeks, on the same pattern, and the 4th of those was bought in from a Mr. Ancram in the spring of 1812, and sold on in Cheltenham, and it was your late brother's wife's pearls, my lady, which the family was given to understand had been lost at sea." The solicitor examined the floorboards with great attention. Behind him, in the doorway, the boy who carried the post for Kestrel Row stood with his bag and did not move an inch. "You are a mender," Lady Ancram said. "I am," Hester said. "I was cheaper than looking, and it has cost your family a great deal more than it cost mine. The step is behind you, my lady. Mind it. It is worn hollow on the left." Nothing was prosecuted. Hester asked that nothing be, because Petherick's book was worth more open than shut, and Fenn never entirely understood it, and never entirely stopped thinking about it. What happened instead was slower and much worse for everybody concerned. The certified extracts went to 4 London houses and the 2 big Bath dealers, and by the autumn, no reputable buyer between Bristol and Chester would take in a woman's jewels from a man without a written line saying where they came from, because the Duke of Ardwick's people asked, and asking is contagious. Vokes returned the parure in September without being sued, on advice. Mrs. Vokes told everyone she had never liked garnets. Lady Ancram went to Boulogne. The county said the Duke of Ardwick had lost his reason over a mender in a back street, and said it for about 6 weeks, and then said instead that the woman in Kestrel Row could tell you who had owned a stone and when, and that a wise man did not offer her a piece with an unexplained history. He asked her in October, in the front room, with the file open between them. He did not kneel, because that would have made it about him. "I have a house that is too large, a hand that will not close, and 8 years of agents I never once checked," he said. "You have taught me what a record is, and every part of what I own is a record I have not read. That is not a proposal, Your Grace. That is an offer of employment. It is both. You may refuse either half." Hester found she wanted to be asked for something practical, so she named 3. That the garnets be sold, all 11 pieces, and the money put to a fund at 4% to pay the fees for women bringing this kind of proof, because a necklace is a necklace, and £210 at 4% is 100 years of somebody else's evidence. That she keep her father's tools and her father's bench, and go on taking work under her own name, and that nobody in any house of his ever again be told that a thing is not worth writing down. 4 years on, there was a room off the library at Ardwick, with a bench in it, and 2 girls at it 3 mornings a week, learning to cut a collet, and more importantly, learning to draw what they had cut, and date it. The fund paid 7 fees in the first year. Sharp died in Valparaiso in the second, of a fever, owing money, and Hester read the letter twice and put it in the file with the rest. On a wet evening in November, she came in with a loop still in her hand, and found the Duke at the table, with his stiff left hand flat on a ledger, and their son asleep against his shoulder. And she stood in the doorway and said nothing, because there was nothing that wanted saying. The empty japanned box sat on the shelf above them, with its lining still slit. A woman's jewels are her only portable property. It turns out the truly portable thing was never the stones. It was the paper in the lining, and the hand that thought to put it there. If Hester, drawing 11 pieces from memory on the worst night of her life, got you the way it got me, you know what to do. Hit that like button, and send this one to somebody who believes the quiet one at the table is usually the one keeping the record. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another of these long historical dramas. And tell me down in the comments, what was the moment you knew she had already won? Was it the pencil, the chair he pulled out, or the collet? I will see you in the next one.